Welcome to Decoding Parenthood, where we unleash the secrets of parenting. Today, we will be speaking with Ms. Kingston Roche about creating curiosity-inspired life and world. Welcome. We would really appreciate it if you can introduce yourself to our viewers, our listeners, and then we can dive into our topic for today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for
Of
having me.
course.
So my name is Mary Kingston Roach. I am a mom of two kids, ages 6 and 4. So one is in kindergarten, one's in preschool. I am a former teacher, middle and high school English, and then went into policy. And I've been working in education policy the last 13 years, advocating for policies and funding to support children and families, and especially for a high quality, equitable education. And most recently, I am the founder of an organization called Live Curious, which aims to support people to cultivate their curiosity to live lives of greater joy, connection, and impact.
Also, can we mention that you have a TED Talk also
Sure.
if they want to listen to the TED Talk, and it's really very informative. I've heard it myself. And so we will dig in and talk about curiosity. So, you know, in your talk, you also mentioned about how kids ask so many questions, right?
Mhm.
What does curiosity mean to you?
Sure, great question. I've read different definitions, and how I kind of define it is a really strong desire to learn and also understand.
Okay.
So I think differentiating between learning and understanding, because to learn something may just be to learn a fact, right? But to understand implies that there may be some connection there, that you want to understand where a person's opinion is coming from, or a little bit more about their experience. And so I think it's important to use both those words when we define it.
Okay. So has curiosity, do you think, has it changed over the years? Or we can say, like, has it changed like pre-COVID to post-COVID?
That's a great question. From what I've been reading about curiosity, it's had different reputations over the centuries and according to different cultures. So I'm born and raised Catholic. I still practice. Sometimes in our religion, curiosity is discouraged, to not question things. But at the same time, when you look at the New Testament, Jesus asks a lot of questions of people. So
Mm-hmm.
it's funny how there's mixed messages in different cultures. I think so. Bringing it to the present, I think people are really seeing the value of it to create connection and bridge differences. What I found really interesting as I reflected on it with my life, and especially teaching, was it was almost in the subconscious or background that I knew I wanted to cultivate my students' curiosity, but there was no conversation about it, direct reference to it in my education experience, and even in policy, you don't see the word curiosity in legislation. And so I'm really passionate about making it more visible, making people more aware of the benefits and kind of the urgency for us to not only maintain and deepen our children's curiosity, but also to reawaken our own. There's a lot of benefits that I can go into about curiosity.
So what do you think actually is curiosity different in adults versus children?
So there's research around how we are basically most curious when we are our youngest. So babies, for anyone who has had babies or just has a baby in their life, sees how they look around the room and they are trying to almost see new things. So there's been research that our brain, we like novelty, we like new things. And so starting from a very young age, babies are always looking for new things. There's been research, including from Professor Susan Engel at Williams College. She wrote a great book called The Hungry Mind, showing that kids' curiosity peaks around the age 4 in preschool. And then largely due to our education system, that curiosity unfortunately starts to decrease over time. There's also kind of a effect where the more kids learn, they might feel like their curiosity is satisfied and if they're being rewarded for the correct answers on things rather than asking great questions, that they aren't nurturing their curiosity. Unfortunately, because our education system, and I can get more into that, how it does this, but how it tends to reward answers over questions. By the time we become adults, we may not realize it, but our curiosity is much more dampened than when we were young kids. And the effects of this, I think we see both within ourselves, sometimes when we lose interest in things or just go through life and not as a routine and not try to look for novelty or pursue our interests. And then we see it kind of on a community society level where we judge and make assumptions instead of trying to understand and get to know people. So I believe there is a real urgency around making sure we nurture our kids' natural curiosity and then bringing back our own for our own benefit and for our collective benefit.
As you mentioned, curiosity peaks at the age of 4, and then it decreases when they start school. Why does it decrease when they get to school?
Yeah. So, a large part of this is our country's current education policies. And as I mentioned, I'm a former teacher. I taught under the past law that we had, which is No Child Left Behind. We have a new law called the Every Student Succeeds Act, which oversees grades K through 12 law. And it did take away a lot of the pressures that No Child Left Behind had about closing schools due to poor test scores. But there still is now that I see, and when I talk to teacher friends, the pressure to make sure that students do well on the tests and that there's a rush to get through as much curriculum as possible instead of going deeper and giving space and time for students to not only explore the curriculum through inquiry, but also different modalities through ways that they might want to do. So if it's not making sure it's not just multiple choice tests or things that have just one correct answer, but really exploring essential questions they might have about things and then giving them options to do it through an art project or a video. So it's giving students voice and choice. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more that students see that the curriculum is kind of rushed and somewhat disconnected from their interests, they may tune out and then become less curious about what they're learning and seek only the achievement side of it, which is, getting good grades and getting into college. I don't think it's that black and white. I think, there's so much curiosity still in our schools, and we have amazing teachers who are finding ways to still nurture that. But when we have policies that really do tend to reward correct answers over amazing questions, then you do tend to narrow the curriculum towards trying to prepare students to get those answers correct, rather than the bigger, I think, goal of education is to help students really become great questioners and problem solvers and information seekers. And the ultimate goal, I think, is to help students discover and pursue their own interests so they can pursue a fulfilling life doing those things.
As we're talking about, the curriculum, a question came to my mind was, as a parent, I have an 8-year-old. And, to me, curiosity, is when like a child might ask a million questions because they're so curious, right? Like, why is this way? Why is it hot today? Why is it cold, right? But if a child is not asking questions, it could be for any reason, right? Maybe they're shy, or maybe they're not extremely social, or maybe they just, they don't want to ask questions. Does it mean that they're not curious?
Great question. And no, definitely not. I think it does have to do with the right environment. And I think parents know their kids best, and it's paying attention to where they feel most comfortable. So like you said, some kids are shy, and that may be another place where in schools they are not pursuing their curiosity because maybe there's only whole group formats versus small group where they may feel more comfortable. So I think it's for us as parents and then teachers to pay attention to how students feel most comfortable to express themselves. And maybe it's also giving some good question prompts to prompt them. So, what do you observe about this? What do you notice? Instead of it maybe for them more stressful questions like what interests you. If they can't answer that, then starting with what do they notice and what do they pay attention to, and then you are helping them notice things that they can then become interested in. I think it's the comfort thing around how comfortable they feel as well, whether it's shyness or expressing themselves, and then it's giving them the different formats. So maybe one child may love books and be really drawn to that, but another child needs things more hands-on. So maybe they thrive when they go to a museum or an interactive exhibit, and then you see that spark in their eye, and then they start talking to you about what they're curious. So I think it's we just need to pay attention to our kids and help them pay attention to the world, and then when we observe what they are curious about, give them more opportunities in those spaces to explore those things.
So that's great information. But I also have a question about, I was never a teacher in the public school. Now, my daughter comes home and she has a million questions ready for me. And it's all the time. And it's great because she's trying to, spark. I think she's asking me questions, so I can Google it and find the answer too. So I'm learning as she's asking me questions. But then I wonder, and my wonder is, are they allowed to ask questions in school, or is she asking only me? So, I have asked her several times, and I've said, I mean, are you asking these questions to your teacher, or is it just for me? Of course, I've never got an answer. But as a, former educator that you come from, what is your insight on that? Are they allowed to ask those questions in school, or, they have to wait for their turn and they have to raise them because they also have to go through a curriculum, right? They just cannot keep on answering questions all day.
Right. That's a great question. And this is my answer is gonna touch on the importance of adults really embracing their own curiosity, because we need the adults who work with students to really embrace their own curiosity so they can model it and understand the power of it. But so there's definitely no policy that I know of saying that students will be prohibited to ask questions in class. So I think it comes down to good instructional practices, and that goes into teacher training and professional development, and creating that climate, that environment that we talked about of students feeling comfortable to do that. I think teachers are up against what I mentioned, which is this real feeling of pressure to cover as many standards as possible, to have students master those standards and demonstrate that. That said, there are creative ways and ways that teachers can create that environment for students to not only ask questions of the teacher, because it shouldn't be that only relationship. Ask questions and learn from each other. And that's something I wish I had actually done more of when I was a teacher, is to just say to the students, you guys have a lot to teach each other and ask each other, and do more of that. And that I can observe and coach them through asking great questions. So it's almost like giving those explicit skills around how to ask great questions. There's other explicit curiosity skills we can teach students. And I think we can find spaces in our school day, like during homeroom or advisory periods or electives, to do this. So helping them learn how to ask great questions, and ones that actually challenge and push the status quo in terms of how our world works, because that is how we make progress, right? Also, being great listeners, that's a real skill. Third would be how to seek out diverse perspectives. So I ran an after-school program for middle school students last year, and had them pretend to be journalists, and gave them the assignment that you need to interview 2 classmates who have different perspectives on the same topic. We picked hot topics like whether we should require school uniforms and social media use and things like that. And they had to really listen for the differences in the perspectives and then reflect on how that lined up with their own perspective and whether those perspectives changed their opinion about things. So I think there's explicit skills we can teach too, as well as weaving in some of these practices during the regular school day.
So we have been talking about curiosity in children and how we can nurture it. What are the benefits of curiosity?
Yeah, so curiosity is like one of the biggest natural beneficial traits we can have. It just keeps on giving throughout our life. So when we're young and in school, there's been research that curiosity is as important a factor as nearly as important as intelligence in determining how well kids do in school. So curiosity and persistence are two characteristics that pretty much equal the importance of intelligence as found in research. And if you think about it, curiosity and persistence are correlated because the more curiosity or interest you have in something, the more likely you're going to persist to learn and to learn it. Other benefits when you research around brain science is that there's been research that when kids are curious about a subject, when their curiosity is piqued and they learn something, they retain that information longer and better than if they were not curious about it. Also, the area in our brain that is activated by reward and pleasure is activated when they learn something they're curious about or when they're learning something they're curious about. So it's actually pleasurable to learn when you're curious about something too. There's been good brain research there. There's also research that this benefit of curiosity carries into our adult life, including in our workspaces. There's research that people are more successful in work in their careers when they're curious. That I think that has to do with the fact that employers like having employees who are engaged and interested in problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
It leads to more empathy, which also strengthens relationships. There's been research that curiosity is associated with greater levels of well-being, psychological well-being. There's also research that being curious makes us more comfortable with ambiguity and helps us see new situations as less of a threat and more as just something that we're curious about, that we want to learn about. So I think that goes back to benefits for kids is really helping them try new things and be okay with failing. Curiosity also helps us in difficult conversations to bridge differences and to be more open-minded to each other, to decrease conflict. And there's been research around that too, how when we come into a conversation without assumptions or a certain mindset, but we're more open-minded, we can just make more progress to bridge differences as well. So it's a lot of benefits from babies through adults. It's funny, the relationship between curiosity and technology. I know now we have AI and we're in all these debates about what they'll do. And it's funny, we have both Alexa and a Google Home in our home because my husband likes that technology. And at first I was a little worried that, are the kids just going to ask them all these questions, but then not pursue the information on their own. But I think it's good that they're trying to engage with this technology and find out. Our 6-year-old will ask them, "Tell me a joke," or "Tell me a joke about this." So that's curiosity, right?
Yeah,
and it's and they're just pursuing that. So it's us as adults also not being afraid of new things like that, but being open-minded. Obviously, taking into account, the potential challenges of it, but I had to check myself during that time saying, okay, I need to keep an open mind with this, right?
So yeah. So we spoke about the children and their curiosity, but what about adults? So why is it important for adults to nurture our own curiosity?
Yeah. So I'll share a personal story and then I'll share some couple just examples. So a couple of years ago, I just felt kind of stuck personally in my life. I felt like I wasn't really growing professionally, and I had lost interest in just extracurriculars or things that usually I'm engaged in. And it was very frustrating because no one wants to feel stuck. I think it's a natural desire that humans constantly want to grow. It's like a
Yeah.
need. And so I just read some books that expanded my thinking about, what I'm capable of, and just like expanded my perspective. I signed up for a marathon. I'd never run a marathon before, and I look back on it and call it now a joyful challenge. And I advocate for that for everyone, which is, humans also, I think we respond well to challenges. It energizes us. And when it's something you choose, it can be really empowering that you see it through. And so how that relates to curiosity is, I think it's whenever you feel stuck in life, personally, emotionally, psychologically, it's good to remember that there's always something out there that will spark your interest, and that you just need to give yourself that time and space to observe and discover, and then give yourself that time and space to pursue. So it could be something as small as, like visiting more museums around like a certain time of history, or it could be a big trip or taking a class. But I think we have just as much as we have a need for air and water, we need our curiosity. Why else besides that, the personal well-being is how we relate to each other. So there's been polls showing how divided our country is right now politically. And actually the Surgeon General came out this week kind of alerting us about the epidemic of loneliness, and calling for they're creating a framework to address loneliness and to increase social connection. And actually, loneliness is correlated with physical effects like chronic pain and diabetes and early death. And so instilling curiosity, not only in our own interests, but in each other, will help us reach out to each other and just ask, how are you doing? What are our common interests? We have much more in common with each other than we all might see on the surface, or media is telling us. And so there's benefits for ourselves and also how we relate to each other.
What made you focus on the aspect of curiosity to be the main focal point that all schools should be implementing?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. One is because after working in education my entire career, I'm just really surprised how we just don't talk about it at all. We use similar terms like student engagement and now life skills as well. But we don't center it and think about it and invest in it as much as we should. So I wanted to lift it up to just have us examine it more in general. Second is I see both a practical and powerful application to curiosity for learning. So curiosity, as I mentioned earlier with the research, helps children retain information better and enjoy learning more. And so that's going to make them more successful in school, which we all want. That's the practical side of it, to help them get, good jobs and be successful. The powerful side of it, and I think the most important side of it, is curiosity fosters a love of learning in kids that goes well beyond the mission of school to help them become fulfilled, joyful adults. If kids can discover what they're curious about, and we, as in our schools and communities, provide the means for them to pursue that, then that's success, and they're going to be happy adults, and that's going to make their lives better and all of our lives better. So I think it's both, our education system, the purpose of it is, sometimes talked about as a means to an end. I definitely disagree with that. I think, learning in itself is a joy. I think curiosity is one of those things that shows a practical power and that lifelong learning as well. I did a little research to make sure I got as many good tips for you guys as possible. So I want to give a shout out to the Mayo Clinic from their blog, and 0 to 3, and a few other organizations that I'll draw from for this, as well as my own thoughts. So a couple of things we can do as parents is like just expose your kids to different experiences and places. Show them the world. So go on trips. A trip doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be the other side of town, another neighborhood. Just keep exposing them to things. Spend time together as a family doing some of what you think might be mundane things, but explaining and showing them things. So one of the reasons I'm not a great cook these days is because my mom, maybe it's because she had 4 kids and she just wanted us out of the way, but I never got to watch her make dinner or do that. So inviting kids in to show them how you do the laundry, how you cook, explaining that, having them try it out, is really helpful too. Because to you it's boring, but to them it's exciting. When it comes to things at home, focus on things that are they can manipulate, like Legos, and instead of toys that do everything for them, that like light up and do things for them. So, and honestly, even them just playing outside and exploring in nature is a great way too. So you don't need all the fancy toys. Model being a curious person yourself. So wonder out loud. Say, I wonder, if a rainbow will show up today. When it rained the other day, we were looking out for rainbows, and I was trying to wonder out loud, like, why don't we see one yet? And my kid said, because the sun's not out yet. And so modeling that curiosity for them. Also, saying you don't know sometimes can be really good. And then say, to show them that adults don't know everything. And then to have that growth mindset to say, let's look it up together. Encourage and follow what they seem to be interested in. So I'm trying to strike that balance now with 2 young kids, where I ask them if they want to, try this new activity. And if they say yes, great, we go for it. And then just try to check in with them if they like it or not. So my 4-year-old was in gymnastics. She liked it for a while, wanted to stop. That's great. And then even in just everyday things. So this is a story I'm sure parents can relate to. But one day my kids decided they wanted to ride on their scooters around the neighborhood. That I got a nice comfy spot with my coffee and was like, great, I'm going to relax for the next half hour. Of course, 5 minutes in, they say, we want to do something else. We want to go, walk on the trail and pick up sticks. And at first I had that moment. I almost said no because I was comfortable and I didn't want to get up. But then I thought, you know what? I gotta let them pursue their curiosity. So I said, okay. So they were really creative. They took their helmets and actually turned them into baskets to collect rocks and sticks. And I was like, you guys are so creative. So following their interests. Encourage their exploration in a safe way. So a lot of times without realizing it, we say no to so many things, right? Like, don't do that. Don't do this. Sometimes it's warranted if they do something that might be unsafe. But let's say they're trying to play with a houseplant and you're worried about dirt getting out of it or something. Give them a container of dirt to play with and a scoop of water and a stick to play with outside. Simulate that experience in a safe way or a way that doesn't drive you crazy. So those are a couple things. Ask open-ended questions. So I still I struggle with this sometimes. After school, how was school? Good, and then trying to think of what are some open-ended questions, like, what was your favorite activity today and why? Or guess them to think.
Did you go outside, or who did you play with, or how was the weather when you went outside? Was it cold? Or, things like that.
Right. And
don't settle for okay, or don't settle for good.
And the follow-up questions are really good too. Like my son went to the zoo yesterday and I asked him, what was your favorite animal? And he said, and then I said, why? And he almost seemed surprised I asked him, but then he had an answer. So follow-up questions. And let them explore. There's a book I was going to mention, but I'll mention it now, called Thrivers by Michelle Borba. And she researches and summarizes the attributes that help children thrive as adults. She highlights curiosity as an essential one. And she talks about the importance of letting kids tinker and play and experiment. That's how they learn things, to have that scientist research mindset. So for us not to discourage that, but to create environments where they can do that. So those are some ways.
Those are amazing points. And as you mentioned, in your story, that when kids want to explore, they're all over the place. Like, there's a possibility that they could start picking sticks and stones, and they don't want to do that anymore.
Gross bug. And
they now want to take this bug home and save the bug, right? So, and we as parents, we we don't want the bug in the house, but
Mhm.
we have to understand that maybe we can talk about, instead of just saying no, can we take the bug to our backyard or
Yeah.
on our patio and give him a little shade?
Mhm.
And what that happens is that also creates empathy
Mhm.
because they are being nurturing to the bug. We just don't want them to have those, those blocked off, closed off conversations, because that's where they're going to not feel comfortable asking more questions. So
Mhm.
it is
One other
right.
one
No
other
worries. Yeah.
I'd quickly add was would be instead of shutting them down when they ask a question that makes us uncomfortable, helping them figure out an answer. So a common question is, if a child, children, they sometimes wonder out loud in public, right? Like, mommy, why is that person in a wheelchair or
Yeah.
something?
Right.
And then an instinct, our adult instinct, because
It's like, don't
right,
ask that.
don't
Right.
talk about it.
Right.
But what is that telling them? It's telling them to not ask questions,
Or
right?
it's also telling them that whatever they're asking is not appropriate.
Right.
So instead, we talk about, and you explain them
Yep.
that why this person, like, how we all are different,
Mhm.
but we are all special in our own way.
Mhm.
And they understand and they feel more welcome. And if in future they had a child with a disability coming to their classroom, they will feel, or they will make them feel welcome because
Mhm.
you already had that conversation with them
Mhm.
at that point. But if you shut them down on that day, they're going to not welcome that new person into their lives or into their classrooms, and which is not a great thing. So,
Right.
so no, that is, that is a great point that you bring. And, just to summarize, curiosity has endless benefits.
Mhm.
We know that, when we are curious, it comes, like, you can take it from your childhood and take it all the way to your adulthood, even when you're retired. It gives you the psychological stability because you're not bored, you're trying new things, you want to learn new things.
Mhm.
It also helps retaining information better. It also keeps you in your growth mindset so that you're not, you're not done. You're always on the go. So when a child is curious, they're learning more. So instead of stopping them or instead of discouraging them, always give them those opportunities that they can thrive throughout. They might not be able to ask questions all the time because you might be busy, but, take those few minutes, give them that importance so that they keep on asking, because you don't want them to stop asking. So
Right. Exactly.
we truly appreciate you coming today and sharing all these amazing information with us. And we hope that our listeners and our viewers are able to take this information and use it with their children, maybe use it on themselves,
Yep.
and see a change or see a difference in their lifestyle. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Decoding Parenthood. Until next time.